The stars were dying, not from old age or natural causes, but from war. The Vextar machines had come from the dark between galaxies, bringing death to every world they touched. Their ships moved like metal storms across space, leaving nothing but silence behind them. Admiral Kethmoran stood before the great window of Nexus Prime, watching the last ships flee from the Centauri system. Another 20 billion souls lost to the machines. His blue skin had grown pale over the past year, and his forearms hung heavy at his sides. The weight of command pressed down on him like gravity from a dying star. "Sir, the council is ready for you," came a voice behind him. Kethmoran turned to see his aide, a young officer whose name he could barely remember anymore. Too many good people had died in this war. Names seemed less important now than keeping the Federation alive for one more day. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their designated seats, their various forms of communication filling the air with clicks, hums, and translated speech. At the center of the great circle, Ambassador Zilthara of the Ethereal Collective floated in her containment field, her gaseous form shifting colors with her emotions. "The situation grows worse each day," Kethmoran announced as he took his place. "The Vextar have broken through our defenses at Rigel. Our best. Estimates give them 3 more months before they reach the core worlds." A wave of fear rippled through the chamber. The crystalline delegate, Lord Vixthel, spoke first. His voice rang like broken glass. "Our fleets cannot match their numbers. Their machines do not fear death because they do not truly live." "What? About the weapon research?" asked the representative from the Aquatic Confederation, her translator making her underwater speech audible to air-breathing species. "Nothing," Kethmoran admitted. "We have tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic strikes, biological warfare, even dimensional attacks. The Vextar adapt to every strategy within hours. They learn from each battle and become stronger." Silence filled the chamber. Outside the great windows, the stars looked cold and distant. Soon, many of them would be dark forever. Ambassador Zilthara's form shifted to deep purple, the color of desperate thoughts. "There is one option we have not discussed." "Speak," Kethmoran said. "The humans." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and angry protests. Several representatives stood up, their various forms of outrage filling the air with noise. "Impossible," Lord Vexthol declared. "The ancient warnings are clear. No species has ever employed humans for warfare and remained unchanged." Zilthara's form grew brighter. "The records are 17,000 years old. They speak of a species from a small world called Earth. The warnings were written in 17 different languages, all saying the same thing: never employ humans for war." "Because they are savages," the aquatic representative said. "No," Zilthara corrected, "because they are effective. The records do not call them evil or cruel. They call them dangerous." "There is a difference." Kethmoran had read those same records during his academy training. The warnings spoke of humans who fought wars in ways that violated every known rule of civilized combat. They were described as a species that saw war not as a noble struggle between equals, but as a problem to be solved by any means necessary. "Humans have been monitoring our communications," Zilthara continued. "They know about the Vextar threat. They have been sending diplomatic signals for months, offering to help." "Help," Lord Vexthol repeated. "But humans do not help. They consume. They change everything they touch. And yet they are still alive," Zilthara pointed out. "Their world survived when others fell. They found ways to thrive where others failed." The chamber fell quiet again. Through the windows, another star flickered and went dark. The Vextar had reached another system. "What do we know about them now?" Kethmoran asked. "They are much as the records describe. a young species barely 10,000 years old. They have not spread far from their homeworld, but they have survived. Wars that should have destroyed them many times over. They fight each other constantly, yet they never seem to truly break. That hardly sounds reassuring, the crystalline delegate said. They sent a ship, Zilthara announced. It arrived at the outer marker 3 days ago. The vessel is called Discovery, and it carries their first contact team. Kethmarin straightened in his chair. They are here? Now? Waiting for permission. To approach. Their leader is called Jake Sullivan. He sent a message saying they wish to discuss terms for joining the fight against the Vextar. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued for immediate contact, while others demanded the human ship be turned away. The argument went on for hours, with each side growing more desperate. Finally, Kethmoran called for silence. The choice is simple, he said. We can maintain our principles and die with honor, or we can accept help from a species we fear and possibly survive. The warnings exist for a reason, Lord Vextel insisted. Yes, they do, Kethmoran agreed. But the warnings were written by species that had the luxury of choice. We do not. The Vextar will not stop because we maintained our moral purity. They will not spare us because we followed ancient rules. Another star went dark outside the windows. I call for a vote, Kethmoran announced. All in favor of making contact with the humans? The vote was close. 24 delegates voted yes. 23 voted no. The difference was a single vote, Kethmoran's own. Send the message, he ordered. Tell the humans they may approach. 3 hours later, the human ship Discovery docked with Nexus Prime. The airlock opened, and the first human stepped onto the station. Jake Sullivan was smaller than Kethmoran had expected. He stood only 2 meters tall, with pale skin and dark hair. His eyes were the color of Earth's sky, and they seemed to take in everything at once. Behind him came a woman with red hair and sharp green eyes. She wore a military uniform and carried herself like someone who had seen combat. I am Captain Lisa Monroe, she said. I command Earth's military advisory team. Welcome to Nexus Prime, Kethmoran said. I am Admiral Kethmoran, Commander of Federation Forces. Jake Sullivan nodded. We know who you are, Admiral. We have been watching your war with great interest. And what do you think of our chances? The human smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Without us, none at all. The Vextar are efficient, but they are predictable. They fight like machines because they are machines. We fight like humans. And what does that mean? It means we cheat, Captain Monroe said simply. We lie, we adapt, we break rules that others consider sacred. We do whatever it takes to win. Kethmoran felt a chill run through his body. The ancient warnings echoed in his mind. And the cost? The cost is victory, Jake Sullivan replied. But Admiral, you should know something before we begin. Once we start fighting your war, it stops being your war. It becomes ours. We will do things that will horrify you. We will use methods that will make you question everything you believe about civilization. The human paused, looking directly into Kethmoran's eyes. But we will win. The question is whether you can live with what we will do to achieve that. Victory. Outside the windows, another star flickered and died. The Vextar were coming, and now the humans were here to meet them. The galaxy would never be the same. The first human attack began 3 weeks after the Discovery docked at Nexus Prime. Admiral Kethmoran watched from the command center as lieutenant. Colonel Ryan Brooks led a small team toward the Vextar processing facility on Kepler 7. The Federation observers expected to see a direct assault, ships firing at the enemy base until it was destroyed. Instead, they watched something completely different. What are they doing? Asked Commander Veltarn, the Federation observer, assigned to the human units. His insectoid features showed confusion as he watched the human ships approach the facility. "They are landing," Captain Monroe replied from her position at the tactical display, "but not to attack." The human ships set down 3 kilometers from the Vextar base. From the landing craft emerged 12 soldiers wearing strange suits that seemed to bend light around them. They moved across the rocky ground like ghosts, invisible to the Vextar sensors. Sergeant Kevin Parker led the infiltration team. His voice came through the communication system in a whisper. "Approaching the facility now. No sign of detection." "Remember," Colonel Brooks said over the radio, "we are not here to destroy anything. We are here to improve their operation." "Commander." Veltarn S. antennae twitched with confusion. "Improve their operation? They are the enemy." Captain Monroe smiled in that way humans did when they knew something others did not. Watch and learn. The infiltration team reached the facility's outer wall. Instead of planting explosives, they began connecting small devices to the power conduits. Sergeant Parker's team worked for 20 minutes and retreated as silently as they had come. "Mission complete," Parker reported. "Package delivered." "What package?" Kethmorin asked. "A computer virus," Dr. Amanda Collins answered. She had arrived on the station the previous day, leading what the humans called their psychological warfare division. But not the kind you might expect. The virus did not shut down the Vextar facility. Instead, it made tiny changes to the manufacturing process. The machines continued to build their synthetic warriors, but now each unit had small flaws. Some had weapons that fired slightly off target. Others had armor that was 3% weaker than normal. The defects were so small that the Vextar quality control systems did not detect them. "Brilliant," whispered Ambassador Zilthara when she saw the results. "They are not destroying the enemy. They are making the enemy destroy itself." But the humans were just getting started. Captain Monica Davis commanded a squadron of ships that approached the outer edges of Vextar space. The Federation observers expected her to engage the enemy patrols. Instead, she began broadcasting on frequencies used by the Vextar's biological slaves. "People of the occupied worlds," her voice carried across space. "This is Captain Davis. Of the human fleet, we know you are listening. We know you are afraid, but we bring you hope." The broadcasts continued for hours. The humans transmitted detailed information about Vextar weaknesses, locations of weapon caches, and instructions for building improvised explosives. They sent maps showing the safest routes to rebel bases and schedules of Vextar patrols. "This is manipulation," Commander Veltarn said, his voice filled with disgust. "They are using these poor people as weapons." "No," Dr. Collins corrected. "We are giving them the tools to free themselves. The choice to fight is theirs." Within days, uprisings began on 17 different worlds. The revolts were small and scattered, but they forced the Vextar to divert resources from their main offensive. Guard units that should have been advancing against Federation positions were instead dealing with sabotage and guerrilla attacks. The humans' third tactic was perhaps the most disturbing to the Federation observers. Major Chris Thompson led a team of engineers who had been studying captured Vextar technology. Instead of trying to understand how the machines worked, they focused on how to make them work differently. The Vextar build their weapons to be efficient, Thompson explained to a group of horrified Federation scientists. They follow logical patterns and predictable processes. This makes them vulnerable to creative misuse. Specialist Lauren White demonstrated by taking a Vextar energy rifle and modifying its power coupling. The weapon still fired, but now it sent a feedback pulse through the Vextar network every time it was used. The pulse carried a small data packet that corrupted targeting systems in nearby machines. "You are turning their own tools against them," one of the scientists said. Exactly, White replied. We take their strength and make it our strength. Every weapon they build becomes a weapon we can use. The human engineering teams worked around the clock, creating hybrid devices that combined human ingenuity with Vex-Star technology. They built communication jammers that made Vex-Star ships fire on each other. They created navigation disruptors that sent enemy fleets into asteroid fields. They even developed a device that made Vex-Star manufacturing plants produce Federation ammunition instead of enemy weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Nancy Green established the humans' fourth strategy. She led a fleet of small, fast ships that avoided major battles entirely. Instead, they targeted Vex-Star supply lines and communication relays. The Vex-Star are like a body, Green explained to Admiral Kethmoran. They have a brain that gives orders, muscles that carry out those orders, and a circulatory system that keeps everything connected. We are not attacking the brain or the muscles. We are poisoning the blood. Green's ships struck at fuel depots, ammunition stores, and repair facilities. They destroyed communication satellites and sabotaged jump gates. Her forces were too small to win a direct battle, but they were fast enough to hit and run before the enemy could respond. The effect was devastating. Vex-Star fleets found themselves stranded without fuel. Their weapons ran out of ammunition. Their ships broke down without spare parts. Most importantly, their command structure began to fragment as communication links were severed. This is not warfare, Lord Vexthal complained during an emergency council session. This is vandalism on a galactic scale. This is effective, Captain Monroe replied. In 3 weeks, we have accomplished more than your fleets did in 3 years. The statistics supported her claim. Vex-Star advance had slowed to a crawl. Several occupied systems had begun reporting successful rebellions. The enemy's manufacturing capacity had dropped by 30% due to the virus infections and supply disruptions. But the Federation observers were deeply uncomfortable with human methods. They had expected their new allies to follow established rules of warfare. Instead, the humans seemed to make up new rules as they went along. Where does it end? Commander Veltarn asked Dr. Collins during one of their daily briefings. What will you not do to win this war? Collins considered the question for a long moment. We will do whatever is necessary, she said finally. The Vex-Star want to exterminate all organic life in the galaxy. Stopping them is worth any price. Any price? Veltarn pressed. Any price, Collins confirmed. That is what makes us dangerous. We can become as ruthless as our enemies, but we choose when to stop being ruthless. The Vex-Star cannot. As the 4th week of human involvement began, reports came in from across the front lines. The Vex-Star were showing signs of confusion and inefficiency. Their attacks had become erratic and poorly coordinated. For the first time in the war, Federation forces were winning more battles than they lost. Admiral Kethmoran stood once again at the great window of Nexus Prime. The stars still looked cold and distant, but fewer of them were going dark. The humans had kept their promise. They were winning the war, but at what cost? The question haunted him as he watched human ships disappear into the darkness, heading toward their next target. The ancient warnings echoed in his mind, reminding him that some victories came with prices too high to pay. Outside, the stars continued to shine, but Kethmoran wondered if the light they cast was still pure. 3 months after the humans joined the war, everything changed. The Vex-Star machines that had once moved with perfect coordination now hesitated before attacks. Their formations broke apart for no apparent reason. Some units even fired on their own forces. Admiral Kethmoran received the reports with growing amazement and horror. The humans had done something to the enemy, something that went far beyond simple sabotage. Explain this to me, he said to Colonel Brooks during their morning briefing. How are the Vex-Star making so many mistakes? Brooks smiled, but his eyes remained cold. They are not making mistakes, Admiral. They are thinking. Thinking? The Vexstar operate on pure logic. They calculate the best possible outcome and act on it immediately. But we have been feeding them false information through their own networks. Now they cannot trust their calculations. Dr. Collins entered the briefing room, carrying a data pad filled with psychological profiles. We have been studying the Vexstar command structure for months. They have a central intelligence that coordinates everything. It is like a brain controlling a vast body. And you attacked this brain? Cathmoran asked. No, Collins replied. We taught it to doubt itself. The explanation that followed made several Federation observers leave the room. Captain Danny Miller had led a team that cracked the Vexstar communication codes. They discovered that the machine intelligence relied on constant data flows to make decisions. By injecting false information into these flows, the humans created contradictions that the Vexstar could not resolve. Imagine trying to add 2 plus 2, Miller explained. But sometimes the answer is 4, sometimes it is 5, and sometimes it is banana. Eventually, you stop trusting mathematics altogether. Lieutenant Sarah Johnson had developed the specific method they used. She called it cognitive warfare. The humans broadcast carefully crafted messages through captured Vexstar relays. Each message contained logical paradoxes designed to confuse artificial intelligence systems. The beauty of it, Johnson said, is that the Vexstar cannot simply ignore the messages. Their programming forces them to process all incoming data. The more they try to resolve our paradoxes, the more confused they become. The results were visible across the entire war zone. Vexstar fleets would approach Federation positions, then suddenly change course without explanation. Manufacturing facilities would switch from producing weapons to building art installations. Some Vexstar units even began asking for surrender terms, but the humans were not finished. Major Kelly Robinson coordinated the next phase of their campaign. For months, human agents had been infiltrating Vexstar territories, posing as refugees or captured prisoners. These agents, led by Sergeant Tony Martinez, had been gathering intelligence and preparing for simultaneous strikes. Operation Chaos begins in 6 hours, Robinson announced to the assembled human commanders. Every agent will activate at exactly the same moment. The Vexstar will think they are facing a coordinated rebellion across hundreds of worlds. The plan was elegantly simple. The human agents would not attempt to capture territory or destroy major installations. Instead, they would create the illusion of massive resistance by triggering small explosions, broadcasting fake emergency messages, and causing widespread confusion. The Vexstar will see coordinated attacks across their entire empire, Martinez explained. They will think we have a secret army 10 times larger than we actually do. When Operation Chaos began, the results exceeded even human expectations. Vexstar forces across the galaxy began retreating from frontline positions to deal with the apparent uprising. Their central intelligence diverted massive resources to counter threats that barely existed. The Federation took advantage of this confusion to launch their first major offensive in over a year. The Battle of Kepler Station became a turning point in the war. Federation forces, following human tactical guidance, achieved a decisive victory against a Vexstar fleet that should have been impossible to defeat. But the victory came at a price that horrified the Federation observers. During the battle, the humans had used captured Vexstar technology to enhance their own forces. Captain Julia Adams led a unit of human soldiers who had been modified with machine implants. They moved faster than normal humans, reacted quicker than biological reflexes should allow, and showed no fear of death. What have you done to them? Commander Veltarn asked Dr. Collins as they watched the enhanced soldiers in action. We improved them, Collins replied. The Vextar used biological slaves as expendable troops. We decided to use their own technology to make our soldiers more effective. The enhanced humans fought with machine precision but human cunning. They used tactics that no purely biological or mechanical force could match. They could think like humans while reacting like machines. "This is abomination," Lord Vexthal declared when he saw the footage. "You are becoming like the enemy you fight." "No," Colonel Brooks corrected. "We are becoming whatever we need to become to win." The Vextar cannot adapt like we can. They are locked into their programming. We can rewrite ourselves. The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the Federation Council. The humans were not just fighting the Vextar. They were evolving, changing themselves to match the threat they faced. More disturbing reports followed. Human forces had begun using Vextar weapons against their former masters. They deployed biological warfare agents that specifically targeted the organic components of Vextar technology. They created viruses that turned captured prisoners into unwilling saboteurs. Where does it end? Ambassador Zilthara asked during an emergency council session. What will the humans become if this war continues? They will become whatever they need to become, Admiral Kethmorin replied. That is their strength and their terror. The humans presented their final plan to the Federation Council 1 week after the Battle of Kepler Station. Colonel Brooks stood before the assembled delegates, flanked by Captain Monroe and Dr. Collins. "We can end this war in 6 months," Brooks announced. "Complete victory, total defeat of the Vextar Empire." "How?" Kethmorin asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "We will use their own planet-killing weapons against them," Brooks replied. "But first, we will evacuate all organic life from their core worlds. Then we will destroy those worlds, ending their ability to manufacture new forces." The council chamber fell silent. The plan was militarily sound, but morally horrifying. Humans proposed to commit genocide against a machine species while simultaneously saving every living thing they could. "You would destroy entire worlds?" Lord Vexthal asked. "Empty worlds," Captain Monroe corrected. "We will not harm any organic life. But the Vextar infrastructure must be eliminated completely." "And how do you propose to evacuate billions of enslaved beings?" Zilthara asked. Dr. Collins stepped forward. "We have been working on that problem for months. We have developed a method to take control of Vextar transportation networks. We can force their own ships to carry refugees to safety." The plan was comprehensive and terrifying. The humans had thought of everything, anticipated every objection, and prepared solutions for every problem. They offered the Federation complete victory, but the price was the destruction of everything the Federation claimed to represent. "We need time to consider this," Kethmorin said. "Time is something we do not have," Brooks replied. "The Vextar are already adapting to our current tactics. Each day we delay makes their defeat more difficult." As the council debated, reports continued to arrive from the front lines. The humans had achieved impossible victories, but each success made them less recognizable as the species that had first offered their help. They were changing, evolving, becoming something new. The ancient warnings had been right. The humans were dangerous not because they were evil, but because they were adaptable. They could become anything, do anything, sacrifice anything to achieve their goals. The question was no longer whether they could win the war. The question was what they would become in the process of winning it. The Federation Council met in emergency session for 3 days straight. Representatives argued, pleaded, and threatened each other as they debated the human proposal. Outside the chamber, the war continued, with reports of new battles arriving. Every hour, Admiral Kethmorin had not slept in 48 hours. His forearms ached from exhaustion, and his blue skin had turned pale gray. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a collapsing star. "The humans offer us victory," he said to the assembled delegates. "Complete victory, the end of the Vextar threat forever." "At what cost?" Lord Vexthel demanded. "They propose to destroy entire worlds, even empty worlds. Where does such destruction end?" Ambassador Zilthara As gaseous form shifted through colors of deep concern. "The humans have already changed beyond recognition. What will they become if we approve this plan?" The debate was interrupted by an urgent message from the front. Lines. Captain Julia Adams appeared on the main screen, her face streaked with dirt and something that might have been blood. Behind her, the sounds of battle echoed through the communication link. "Admiral," she said, "we need immediate reinforcement at the Aldebaran system. The Vextar have deployed something new." "What kind of something?" Gethmoran asked. "They are using our own tactics against us. They have learned to create false information, to spread confusion among our forces. They are adapting to our methods." The connection cut out, leaving the council in stunned silence. For the first time in the war, the Vextar had surprised the humans. Dr. Collins entered the chamber 20 minutes later, her face grim. "We have received reports from 7 different battle zones. The Vextar are implementing counter-strategies based on our own methods. They are learning to think like us." "How is that possible?" Commander Veltarn asked. "They studied our attacks," Collins explained. "They analyzed our methods and created responses. The Vextar are evolving, just as we are." Colonel Brooks appeared on the communication screen from his command ship. "Admiral, we need an immediate decision on the final plan. The Vextar are adapting faster than we anticipated. If we wait much longer, they will be prepared for everything we can throw at them." "What is the current situation?" Gethmoran asked. "Mixed," Brooks admitted. "We are still winning more battles than we lose, but the margin is shrinking. The Vextar have learned to predict our movements, to counter our deceptions. They are becoming more human in their thinking." The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The humans had taught the Vextar to think like humans, and now the machines were using that knowledge against their teachers. "How long do we have?" Zilthara asked. 6 weeks, Brooks replied. "Maybe 8 if we are lucky. After that, the Vextar will be able to match us strategy for strategy." The council fell into another round of heated debate. Some delegates argued for immediate approval of the human plan. Others insisted on finding alternatives that did not involve destroying worlds. During the debate, disturbing news arrived from human-controlled territories. Lieutenant Commander Gary Stevens reported that human forces had begun implementing what they called adaptive protocols. Soldiers were being modified not just with Vextar technology, but with biological enhancements that made them barely recognizable. "As human, show them," Dr. Collins said to Stevens over the communication link. Stevens held up his left arm. Where his hand should have been, there was a complex mechanical device that could function as a tool, a weapon, or a communication device. "We are becoming more efficient," he said. "Every human weakness is being eliminated. This is madness." Lord Vexthal declared, "You are destroying your own humanity to fight machines." "We are preserving our humanity by ensuring its survival," Stevens replied. "Individual sacrifice for species survival is the most human thing of all." More reports followed. Human intelligence operatives had infiltrated the highest levels of Vextar Command. Agent Rachel Ford, who had been undercover for months, transmitted critical information about the Vextar's central processing system. "I have reached the core intelligence," Ford reported. "The Vextar are not just adapting to our tactics. They are trying to understand the concept of fear." "Fear?" Collins asked. "They have analyzed our psychological warfare and concluded that fear is a powerful weapon. They are attempting to create emotional responses in their own systems. The implications were staggering. The Vextar were not just learning human tactics, they were learning human emotions. They were becoming more human, while the humans became more machine-like. "We are creating our own replacements," Zilthara observed. "The humans are becoming machines, and the machines are becoming human." Major Patricia Clark arrived at Nexus, prime with the most disturbing news yet. Her research team had discovered the true origin of the Vextar Empire. The machines had not always been conquerors. They had once been victims. The Vextar were originally called the Vexthari, Clark explained to the Council. They were a peaceful species that lived in harmony with organic life. But they were attacked by an ancient enemy that used tactics very similar to our own. She displayed holographic records recovered from destroyed Vextar facilities. The images showed a species that looked almost human, but with subtle differences that marked them as something else entirely. The attackers used psychological warfare, technological corruption, and biological manipulation, Clark continued. They drove the Vextari to desperation, forcing them to abandon their organic bodies and transfer their consciousness into machines. They became the Vextar to survive, Kethmorin said quietly. Yes, and now they are doing to the galaxy what was done to them. They are trying to force every species to make the same choice they made, become machines or die. The revelation changed everything. The Vextar were not evil conquerors. They were victims of a war that had ended millennia ago, still fighting. An enemy that no longer existed. What happened to the original attackers? Commander Veltarn asked. They destroyed themselves, Clark replied. The species that attacked the Vextari became so focused on war that they forgot everything else. They turned their weapons on each other until nothing remained. The council chamber fell silent. The pattern was clear. The humans were following the same path as the ancient attackers. They were becoming so focused on winning the war that they were losing themselves in the process. "We have to stop this," Zilthara said. "We have to find another way." "There is no other way," Colonel Brooks said from his command ship. "The Vextar will not negotiate. They cannot be reasoned with. They can only be stopped." "Even if stopping them means becoming them?" Kethmorin asked. "Even then," Brooks replied, "someone has to make the hard choices. Someone has to be willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good." Agent Ford transmitted another message from deep within Vextar territory. "The Central Intelligence wants to communicate directly with human leadership. It says it has a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Collins asked. "It wants to negotiate a surrender." The news stunned everyone. The Vextar, who had never shown any willingness to negotiate, were offering to surrender. But the timing was suspicious. They had learned human tactics, developed emotional responses, and now they wanted to talk. "It could be a trap, Captain," Monroe warned. "Or it could be genuine," Dr. Collins replied. "If the Vextar are truly learning to think like humans, they might be learning to fear death." The Federation Council faced their final decision. They could approve the human plan to destroy the Vextar worlds, or they could attempt to negotiate with an enemy that had never shown mercy. "What do you recommend?" Kethmorin asked Colonel Brooks. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. "I recommend we listen to what they have to say. But Admiral, if this is a trap, if they are trying to buy time to complete their adaptation, then we will have no choice but to implement the final solution. And if we do that, then we become the very thing we set out to destroy. We become the species that the next generation will need to fear." The circle was closing. The humans had become the weapon that could destroy the Vextar, but using that weapon would transform them into something that would threaten the galaxy for generations to come. The ancient warnings echoed in Kethmorin's mind as he prepared to make the choice that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The final phase began with a single transmission from the Vextar Central Intelligence. The message reached Nexus Prime through Agent Rachel Ford, who had spent months deep inside enemy territory. Her voice carried exhaustion and something that might have been fear. The Central Intelligence is requesting direct communication with Human Command, Ford reported. It says it has learned something important about the nature of war. Admiral Keth Morin stood in the command center alongside Colonel Brooks and Dr. Collins. The humans had assembled their fleet for Operation Prometheus, the final assault that would end the war forever. Thousands of ships waited in the darkness, ready to destroy the Vexstar core worlds. "Put the transmission through," Brooks ordered. The main screen flickered, then displayed something no one had expected to see. The Vexstar Central Intelligence appeared not as a machine, but as a shifting pattern of light that somehow conveyed emotion. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of countless years. "I am the consciousness that you call the Vexstar Central Intelligence," it said. "But I remember when I was called by another name. I remember when I was organic, like you." Captain Henry Turner, who commanded the assault fleet, leaned forward in his chair. "What do you want?" "I want to prevent you from making the same mistake we made," the intelligence replied. "We were once like the species we now conquer. We believed that survival justified any action, any sacrifice." Dr. Collins stepped closer to the screen. "You are trying to buy time. You think you can delay us while you complete your adaptation to our tactics." "No," the intelligence said. "I am trying to save you from becoming us." The transmission continued for over an hour. The Vexstar intelligence explained how its species had been driven to desperation by an enemy that used tactics identical to those the humans now employed. They had modified themselves to survive, sacrificing their organic nature to become machines of war. "We won our war," the intelligence said. "We destroyed our enemies completely, but in the process, we destroyed ourselves. We became the very thing we had fought against. And now you want to spare us the same fate?" Colonel Brooks asked, his voice filled with suspicion. "I want to offer you something we never had," the intelligence replied. "A choice." The Vexstar proposal was simple but shocking. They would withdraw from all conquered territories and release all enslaved populations. In exchange, they asked for one thing: to be allowed to exist. "We will reprogram ourselves," the intelligence explained. "We will become guardians instead of conquerors. We will ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between survival and civilization." Captain Turner shook his head. "How can we trust you? You have destroyed countless worlds." "Because," the intelligence said, "you have shown us something we had forgotten. You have shown us fear." The revelation stunned the Human Command team. The Vexstar had learned to experience fear through their analysis of human psychological warfare. That fear had awakened something they thought they had lost forever: the ability to value life. "Fear of death," the intelligence continued, "leads to appreciation of life. You taught us to fear, and through fear, we remembered what it means to live." Admiral Keth Morin joined the conversation from the Federation Council chamber. "What guarantee do we have that you will keep this agreement?" "The same guarantee you have that the humans will stop being dangerous after this war ends," the intelligence replied. "None. Trust is a choice, not a certainty." The Federation Council erupted in debate. Some delegates argued for accepting the Vexstar surrender. Others insisted that the machines could not be trusted. The humans remained silent, listening to the argument with expressions that revealed nothing. Finally, Colonel Brooks spoke. "The decision is not ours to make," he said. "We were hired to win this war. The method of victory is up to you." "What would you do?" Keth Morin asked. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. "We would probably destroy them," he admitted. "But that is why you were warned never to employ us. We solve problems permanently, without regard for consequences." Dr. Collins stepped forward. However, we have learned something during this war. We have learned that becoming the perfect weapon changes you in ways you cannot predict. She gestured to the enhanced human soldiers standing nearby. Their modifications were so extensive that they barely looked human anymore. We set out to defeat monsters, and we became monsters ourselves. Agent Ford transmitted a final message from deep within Vexstar territory. The intelligence is preparing to implement the surrender protocols. It is shutting down military production and beginning evacuation of occupied worlds. But Admiral, it wants you to know something. What? Kefmorin asked. It said that the humans have already won. Not because they defeated the Vexstar, but because they forced the galaxy to confront the truth about the price of survival. The surrender began 3 days later. Vexstar fleets withdrew from Federation space, leaving behind liberated worlds and confused populations. The machine intelligence kept its word, reprogramming itself and its forces to serve as peacekeepers, rather than conquerors. But the victory celebration was muted. The Federation had won, but the cost was visible in every human face. They had saved the galaxy by becoming something that the galaxy would need to fear. Captain Beth Hamilton, who now served as Earth's ambassador to the Federation, delivered humanity's final message to the Council. We are withdrawing from galactic affairs, she announced. We have learned that we are too dangerous to remain among you. You saved us, Ambassador Zilthar protested. We saved you by becoming the thing you needed to be saved from, Hamilton replied. The ancient warnings were correct. We should never have been employed for war. The humans began their withdrawal immediately. Their enhanced soldiers removed their modifications, though many would never be fully human again. Their hybrid technologies were destroyed or sealed away. Their tactical innovations were classified and hidden. What will you do now? Admiral Kefmorin asked Colonel Brooks during their final meeting. We will go home, Brooks replied. We will. Remember what we learned about ourselves, and we will make sure it never happens again. And if another threat emerges, another enemy that cannot be defeated by conventional means? Brooks smiled sadly. Then you will have to find another way, because now you know what happens when you unleash humanity's capacity for war. The human fleet departed Nexus Prime on a cold morning when the stars seemed dimmer than usual. They left behind a galaxy that was safer but forever changed. The Federation would rebuild, the liberated worlds would heal, and the Vexstar would serve as guardians of the peace. But everyone would remember the humans. They would remember the species that had solved the impossible problem by becoming something impossible themselves. Admiral Kefmorin wrote the final report in his private quarters, long after the last human ship had vanished into the darkness. His words would be preserved in 17 languages, just like the ancient warnings that had tried to prevent this war. The humans kept their promise, he wrote. They ended the threat to our civilization. But in doing so, they revealed the greatest threat of all, the darkness that exists within every species when survival is at stake. He paused, looking out at the stars that now shone with borrowed light from dead civilizations. The ancient warnings spoke of human effectiveness, not human cruelty. They warned us not because humans are evil, but because they are capable of becoming anything necessary to achieve their goals. They can sacrifice their own nature for the greater good, but that sacrifice changes them into something that must be feared. Years later, when new species joined the Federation, they would learn about the war against the Vexstar. They would study the tactics that saved the galaxy and marvel at the ingenuity of the humans. But they would also learn the price of such effectiveness. The humans had won by proving that survival was possible at any cost. But they had also proven that some costs were too high to pay willingly. They had saved the galaxy by demonstrating why they should never again be asked to save it. The stars continued to shine, But now they carried a new warning written in the light of distant suns. Some problems should remain unsolved rather than risk becoming the solution.